Welcome to Acid Horizon, the Theory podcast. AI, or so-called AI, is everywhere, even if you don't really want it. It's being forced into your various subscription feeds. So, for example, if you buy a new phone, or even some old ones, you now have AI assistants. You subscribe to things like Adobe or Microsoft, and suddenly you have things like Copilot or endless so-called AI assistants every turn. And indeed, at the same time as we are constantly being bombarded with these machines online, are also being bombarded them through the ways in which the contemporary right wing of capital, contemporary right wing governments across the West and beyond are using so-called AI to generate their fantasies of the kind of world they'd like to be living in. And to discuss this, to discuss AI, the new aesthetics of fascism, I am joined by Gareth Watkins, also known as our good comrades over at the Death Sentence podcast, to discuss his, cracking fucking article on like the aesthetics of AI and sort of libidinal economy of the contemporary right for our comrades over at the new Socialist magazine, the Good NS as it's known. Gareth, welcome to the show. Cheers for coming back on.
No, thanks. No, I love the show. I love being on here. So it is good to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, cheers for joining us. And I just wanted to ask first, what sort of events, what sort of kinds of AI spectacle led you to want to center the question of AI art or AI generally in how we think of the aesthetics of fascism? Because, I mean, I know like Benjamin described fascism as kind of like the aestheticization of politics, and we've seen a lot of similar events with people like Trump and even, I would say, Starmer as well, as you do. What sort of led you to want to focus AI in this conversation?
So, two things, right? So first, like I work in the broader tech world, and not like a kind of Silicon Valley thing, but something. I have a tech job in real life. So I'm kind of constantly being bombarded with AI stuff. And that background just gives me the ability to like think about tech things like NFTs or Web 3.0, and just be a bit more skeptical about them, a bit more knowledgeable about it, and like test things like ChatGPT and see if the hype actually is justified, which it is not. It simply isn't. It's a bad product. It does not do simple things like basic math. If you were to ask it to write a 800-word article, it would just guess random numbers until you kind of have to force it to write something that's 800 words or thereabouts. It's a poor product. But the genesis of this particular article was last summer. So this has been percolating in my head for a long time. It was Tommy Robinson, of all people. So for Americans, or basically non-UK people, because I guess a lot of Americans might have heard of him by now, but he's been a kind of figure on the UK far right for decades now, a long time. He's always been around, it seems. He's a kind of football hooligan adjacent small business owner who kind of got famous. I forget why he's famous. He seems to have just always been there. He's basically been a figure on the far right, specifically the Islamophobic part of it, for a very long time. He's been involved in things like he basically derailed a court case against someone for some sort of sexual crime by like going into the courtroom and trying to broadcast in there, and it basically destroyed the case. So potentially someone has gone free who shouldn't have, and he was sent to prison. There was a lot of free Tommy hashtags on the internet, and for some reason last summer he tweeted a picture of it was supposed to be D-Day. That's probably as generous as I can be with it. It was a bunch of soldiers walking into the sea, while a bunch of like massive ships, which weren't present on D-Day, we've all seen Saving Private Ryan. They were just like walking into the sea on D-Day, and it was obvious that he had AI generated it. You could always tell AI generated stuff, and it was just so stupid as a piece of art. Like anyone seeing that would have instantly gone like, why are they walking into the sea? That's the opposite way you want to go on D-Day. He claimed that they were carrying wounded people into the sea. There was no wounded people in the thing. Wounded people typically are on like stretchers or something. It was so incredibly stupid. And you could have just Google image search D-Day. There's a billion pictures out there. He could have used scenes from one of the dozens of films made about it. It would be so easy for him to get if he wanted to pay tribute to people who died on D-Day. There's a billion ways to do that aren't so dumb looking, and people mocked him to the point where it was deleted. I had to go on to Reddit to find the original of it, because it's gone now, because even he felt enough shame of having used it that he ended up deleting it, which is rare for one of these schools. Yeah, like that exact moment was when I was like, okay, it's more than just people are lazy. They want images to be done quickly. They want to hire a graphic designer. This stuff is actually resonating with them in a way. It appeals to them. They don't look at AI art the same way we do. They're not thinking about it the way, or they aren't even thinking about mechanically produced art in the same way we do. You mentioned Walter Benjamin, the whole art in the age of mechanical reproduction. That wouldn't make sense to a right-wing mind at all. I mean, it probably wouldn't make sense to them anyway, because they're not very smart. But yeah, a critique of art being made mechanically is just not going to work with these people. They don't see things the way we do, really, at all. And that's something I've kind of known for a long time, coming from like a quite right-wing household, and seeing kind of every day, and being very interested in this stuff anyway, in the way they think, reading there's a lot of red and black books you can see up here with, that's actually, there's Mishima right there. There's a lot of books you'll see behind me on various right-wing topics. I think Hitler, you won't see Mein Kampf, it's down there. Yeah, Mein Kampf is below the camera line, but I do have it heavily marked up. But yeah, it's something that's always interested me, and that's just ended up eventually getting to New Socialist after almost 6 months of pitching this idea and developing it and getting it into the point where I was happy for it to go out into the world.
And I think one of the interesting things about picking up on Tommy Robertson, particularly in that time, is, of course, that was a time of the pogroms across most of the UK, which I think in terms of the dominant media narrative have been, to use the Orwellian term, memory hold. Oh my God. So it's almost as if there wasn't racial checkpoints being enforced by people on the streets of London, not London, sorry, on the streets of loads of places that weren't London, because I remember behind you London, and let's be honest, no one showed up. And that just became, I don't know, just kind of party at that point, to be honest. It was kind of embarrassing, actually, on both sides. I was sort of like, okay, but now we're just having a festival. It was great. It was a great Brat Summer event, but it was also a fucking pogrom. So there was definitely some few things to be avoided there. But in terms of what the wider right love AI art, and of course I'm also thinking about the absurd AI generated video that Trump put out, essentially calling for the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. And it's interesting, really, given that, I know as well, because we're both huge metalheads, of course. We know that reactionaries, sadly, can make pretty good art. What's interesting as well that you highlight in your article, though, is that they increasingly are not. Where is a Dostoevsky or a Mishima or Gabriel D'Annunzio? There are some good far right writers. You have Dali as a kind of a fascist obsessed painter who still produces some sadly quite beautiful artworks. What do you think the changing relationship is with the right to art? Because in a way, by embracing AI art, they have separated the art from the artist in a quite violent way possible.
Yeah, I mean, this is a book or a PhD to the evolution of the right wing's relationship to art over the 20th century. Because you're right. Dostoevsky, one of the greatest writers of all time. Celine was a brilliant writer and a modernist working avant-garde. And the idea of avant-garde artists on the right today is impossible, isn't it? I was trying to think of who is the greatest right-wing artist currently working. Michel Houellebecq? And he's shit. He hasn't written a good thing. Arguably Atomized and was it Depression or something? His only 2 good books weren't brilliant. I mean, they're fine.
Submission is literally just a plot of Camp of the Saints, but just redone.
It is, yeah. And he's like many right-wingers in general. He can't write about anything else. He couldn't write another Atomized today. Even Atomized was fairly reactionary, but he's probably the greatest right-wing artist in any format out there right now. And he's average at best and quite embarrassing. Yeah, the descent of right-wing art. I don't want to be glib about this, but it's just because they've become stupid. It is really the average cultural literacy and of the average right wingers has descended so far. I mean, I don't know if you saw recently the Sam Cedar debating a group of right wingers in a podcast or something called Jubilee. So it's basically, the format is that a left-wing person sits in the middle of a room. There's 20 people around him. They all come in one at a time to debate him on topics. And I'm no big fan of Sam Cedar. I probably closer to my politics than a lot of people, but still not far enough. But he mopped the floor with these people. They were so incredibly stupid to the they were just uninformed on really basic things. They weren't really capable of basic logic. And to try and come out of that milieu and then make a work of art just seems impossible. I speaking to any right winger nowadays, even the more intellectual ones, your Adrian Vermeule's, your Curtis Yarvin's. I can't imagine them writing a novel, even a very average one. And I could in the turn of the century. I could up until the 50s, 60s. If you read, I don't know, William F. Buckley or someone, he's a terrible human being, but he can write. He can put a sentence together. He can think. And that seems to have just disappeared. Ultimately, I think it's a kind of evolutionary process. They're capable of doing what they need to do without being smart. A cockroach doesn't need to be able to write Shakespeare. It can just be a cockroach. It doesn't need intelligence. So any evolutionary adaptation that would make a cockroach more intelligent is just not going to get selected for. So if a great right-wing writer came around today, they wouldn't be selected for in the marketplace of ideas. They wouldn't be acknowledged as being great because they don't need to be. They need to be Ben Shapiro level. They even, what's his name, Theo Von or Joe Rogan, that's the level you can be at and be a great right winger nowadays. It's just sorted. If you're left wing, if you're interested in art, if you're good at it, you are going to be sorted into the left, or broadly left or the center, and you are going to be sorted out if you are right wing. And that's not to say that what right wingers believe about Hollywood sickos are not going to produce all these great right wing screenplays. I've worked in publishing. I know they would love to publish right wing books if they could. It's just none being submitted to them. I read slush for a big literary agency for a while, and they don't get right wing books. No, the pipeline is just not there. No one is writing the next great right wing novel. I think it's evolutionary pressure at this point has just caused them to stop devoting any energy towards the production or even thinking about art. And there's no right-wing reviews of art that are, I mean, someone like, I don't know, Joan Didion was pretty on the right, but she was brilliant to think about art. That person doesn't exist anymore. That person is Jordan Peterson talking about Disney movies. They simply don't need to think about this stuff, so they don't. They don't need to be smart anymore. And this is what we get.
I think you summarized it pretty well, to be honest, because in terms of the level of impunity that the ruling class currently operate under, I mean, basically, because of the zero interest rates era, the huge wealth transfers over austerity, and the fact that most people who work for them are super precarious now. Well, ultimately, these people don't really hear the word no ever. They only hear the word no once, maybe twice in their lives, and that's when they get divorced. That's the only time they might hear the word no. I mean, that's why, we have things like NEOM over in Saudi Arabia, which essentially, if you have enough money, you can pay people to do whatever you want. And same thing with Trump.
Same thing with AI. It's no one tells Sam Altman, "Oh, this doesn't work. It's not a good product." He still is going out there believing it's as good as a PhD student. Yeah, he apparently doesn't. And just in the right in general, there's no like infra-right like discussion. I mean, we talk about the like circular firing squad on the left, but there is if you say something stupid as a leftist, other people are going to pick up on that, and there will be criticism. There's criticism of my work, and there'll be good faith criticism. There is no criticism, good or bad, on the right at all. No one is that Sam Cedar thing. I've been looking around for people who are like on the more intellectual side of the right to say like, oh God, this is embarrassing. Why are people who believe in us like this? I mean, that's what we would say as leftists if we saw people of that, how stupid they were, how embarrassed and how embarrassing they are as representatives of our intellectual tendency. But there's nothing. Even the Curtis Yarvins of the world, they don't think about this stuff. And if they did, it'd be like they would be deselected. They would be kicked out of the right if they started not. It's like in improv, where they do the yes and thing. I don't know if I basically when you do improv comedy and someone says we're in a fish shop, the other person can't say no, we're not. We're going to be something else. I've got a funnier thing I want to do. You've got to always say yes and to it. The right does that all the time with everything, no matter how stupid. The $8,000 Doge checks that everyone's getting, no one's pushed back. No one ever says no matter how stupid. Even things like QAnon, there's been virtually no pushback on that from the right itself. If leftists started believing in things like that, I mean, this is like way weirder than like possadism or something. I mean, we take the piss out of possadism all the time, aliens and dolphins and stuff. But if that had emerged on the right, fucking Trump would be into it. It would be national policy right now that we're going to meet the dolphin comrades. Yeah, there is no right intellectual culture that can critique itself. It's just push straight ahead.
Or if there is, it's almost like it's really sort of leftist, or people using the aesthetics of the left to be leftist, but really being rightists, like sort of like your compact mag sort of people, where they're sort of they say that I'm a leftist, but here's my critique of the conservative point, but ultimately they do agree on the foundations, and sort of a kind of right wing social democracy. I mean, that's why Vermeil can only someone like Vermeil can only really be a creature of a certain kind of red brownness front. So even in the most formal sense, the only rightist critics of the right who work are leftists. And in terms of their own artistic culture, I mean, this is kind of in a way the failure of Teal, because at the end of the day, all they really talk about is us on the right there, because the motor of their enjoyment seems to mostly be, and this is just vulgarly Lacanian at this point, is that they'll post a really shit piece of art and they won't think it's good art, but they will know that they find something enjoyable in it, which is that it is so aesthetically and politically offensive to most people who will encounter it, and that's what they're going to enjoy. And I guess if you want to unpack something like, what do you think the current sort of libidinal composition of the kind of the AI right or contemporary right is? Because ultimately you describe the right these days as mostly a structure in which to have a kind of, I'll not say anarchic fun, but a kind of fun structured by the property relations of capital that have been stripped away from all of their sort of liberal semblances.
It's always been the case that people have questioned why there are poor people, for example, who are from the right. It doesn't seem to hold any material gain for them at all. They're hurt. Why are they voting against their interests and so on? And there's been a lot of scholarship in recent years that have kind of, well, I mean, probably for a long time, the Frankfurt School talked about this. It's fun for them. It's a hobby for a lot of people. You hear on things like those call-in shows. What's that guy in the UK who does that call-in show where people just call in? They'll have a really stupid opinion about immigrants on boats or something. He will own them online. James O'Brien. James O'Brien, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's just some guy in his flat alone divorced probably, who gets a kick out of calling into these shows and annoying some TV presenter for a little while, then get his evidence of that being posted on YouTube. There's Facebook is full. Every social media has just allowed for any random person to just annoy you. There are in the world like committed far-right militias and cadres and people who take this stuff very seriously. And there are obviously political operatives and think tanks, but the right of the most is hobbyists. It's people who find going on the computer and talking about this stuff to be enjoyable. It's fun for them. And even when you talk to people on the right in your personal life, it's very apparent that a lot of the stuff they say it's just to get a rise out of you. It's just it is to trigger the libs at the end of the day. And they can do it in a very obvious, very direct way, or they can just be irritating. I keep bringing this up, that Sam Cedar thing. If you watch someone on the right debate someone, they're constantly butting in. They're constantly they ignore answers and just will restate their original question again and again. They don't talk to people in the way that you would talk to someone as an equal, as hoping to get some sort of intellectual back and forth going. They're purely there to irritate and annoy people. That seems to be. I mean, I know the expression "the cruelty is the point" is kind of a cliche, and it's been around a long time. I think that article came out in like 2017, but it is the point. That is 100% the case, and it has kind of always been the case. You go back into Burke and de Maistre, the Annuncio, people like that. Cruelty is an incredibly important, central part of these people's, not just their writing and their philosophy, but their personal lives. Like the amount of casual cruelty in the average conservative philosopher, like someone like Roger Scruton, for example. Just how much of a dick that guy was to just people in his life. He had to be kicked out of like a right-wing magazine just because of how unpleasant he was to be around. And that's one of the great 20th century conservative philosophers, a very intelligent, well-read person. I'd love to have some Marxist materialist answer to why they're like this, but it's bad parenting. They're just shitty people whose parents didn't hug them enough. This is exactly what you would expect of a person who has had a really difficult home life and has been brought up by people who didn't really love them and maybe physically or sexually abused them. Any first-year psychology student will be able to tell you this stuff. I mean, there's no material gain to a lot of it. In fact, most of the time they lose out materially. How many right-wingers have lost their jobs because they posted some racist screed on Facebook, then next week they find they're getting fired? If you imagine these people are purely out just to make money, that doesn't make sense after a while. Even the very richest people, Elon Musk's, he's lost so much in the last few weeks to his political views. To think of them as this like homo economicus who are like in a way on how they get more money out of the working class. It makes sense to a point to some of what they do and say, but then it just breaks down. There are so many things that these people do that cost them money in the long run, it costs them power, or end up just destroying themselves. Your boy Hitler is the perfect example of this. There was a billion ways he could have done what he wanted to do and got what he wanted, but his desire to be cruel, to be seen as powerful, to do these like very masculine displays of blitzkrieg warfare, it ended up killing him and destroying his country that apparently he was doing it all for. It's very obvious throughout the last 300 years of there being a right wing that cruelty is the center of their entire libidinal universe. It all revolves around that. One of the recent great books on Corey Robbins' The Reactionary Mind. Really brilliant book on why conservatives do what they do. But I'm kind of finding myself disagreeing with it, because he puts power at the center of everything. They are purely doing what they do in order to keep people, the right people, in power. And that's very true to a point. It's very obvious that things in the US, they want to keep white, straight men at the top of the pyramid. No arguing with that. But when it needs to be like this next step from this purely like power-based analysis is that when they have power, they use that power for cruelty. Power isn't like money that you just save up and use for whatever. It's not fungible. And powers only exists when you in the execution. You can't just save it in a bank. And what the right wing end up doing with their power inevitably is always cruelty. I mean, if I had the power that Trump has right now, if I was suddenly found myself in Trump's body, I would use the power he had for good things. I know power corrupts, but to a point, there's been plenty of people who've gained power and have done great things with it. Castro, even Stalin, he did some amazing things with the power he had. Some terrible things too, but he also, the power, the Soviet Union was in many ways had a lot of great things going on. So power doesn't have to be used for cruelty, but the right wing inevitably always do. So Corey Robbins is correct to say that the right wing always do gain power. They always do put the right people at the top of the pyramid, but that is always in the service of then being able to use that power to enjoy cruelty in a very like base way, as we see in Doge in the US right now, or we see in threats against Canada and Greenland. It's playground bullying at the end of the day. It's really no different from kids in a playground. Yeah, it is cruelty.
It's the best way to put it. I mean, what is the current techno-fascist economy really, other than two man-children who both name their companies after Lord of the Rings, following the wisdom of a man called Mencius Moldbug, who writes about fighting off the Dark Elves, as if Dark Elves are a thing in Lord of the Rings. But he's still framing it in terms of
Dark Elf. Okay, firstly, there are Dark Elves in Lord of the Rings. Read the Silmarillion. Oh, goddamn.
God. All right, yeah. We're cutting this bit out.
They were elves. He did not accept the light of the Valar. So, okay, moving on. But yeah, Mencius Moldbug is the dark elf in that thing. It's the hobbits that I think we're the hobbits. Yeah, he styles himself as a dark elf. And what are dark elves? They're like the S&M elves. They're the evil, cruel elves. I mean, even in his stupid Lord of the Rings inspired thing, he gives the game away a little bit. He says, I'm the type of person in these fantasy worlds who's associated with cruelty. Every dark elf, whether it's in Lord of the Rings, Warhammer, whatever, they're the cruel elves. They're evil. They just they're lawful evil all the time. Even then, yeah, he's got to associate himself with cruelty. Or Elon Musk, literally a few days ago, he said empathy is a bug in humanity's source code.
Oh, it's like a shit version of Peter Watts, isn't it? It's like a really shit version of Peter Watts. And I gotta say, look, these
is there. But
big ups Peter Watts, big ups Blindsight, big ups Echopraxia, big ups The Things. I also think that's a really good short story of his, the one where he rewrites the thing from a perspective of the thing. But I mean, in terms of AI being a cruelty machine, I mean, is AI itself a cruel technology, do you think? Because the way I think of it being used, I mean, I think of like Starmer's promise to mainline AI into the state, and that is just in a way an accelerator of the welfare state in Britain, which is the most cruel. I mean, it's a machine designed to do one thing and one thing only, because it's done it to the count of over 300,000 people since the first round of it this century, which is killing the disabled, and he wants to mainline the killing the disabled machine process into AI.
In the article, I generally talked about generative AI, so your chat GPT and picture generation, things like that. But the other kind of AI, the AI that would be used in government, yeah, it's incredibly cruel. It always has been. Yeah, there are there exist some applications of what could broadly be called artificial intelligence that's useful. Like every time you pay with a credit card, it does a little check on you to make sure it's not fraud. That's helpful. I wouldn't disagree with that. But yeah, the AI that's being used in Doge right now and is going to be used in the UK because they've got this Project Chainsaw that is very obviously Doge and Javier Milei inspired. Yeah, that will be used for justifiable cruelty. There's a cliche in the UK of computer says no. There's a reference to a terrible old comedy show where if you go to a bank looking for a loan, they'll type it all in and they'll say, no, computer says no. Because the algorithms that run the bank have just denied you credit. You need to start a business or keep your house or something. And there's going to be a lot of there currently is a lot of computer says no in the British welfare system. And there will be even more. There'll be a lot of looking through people's records, linking up with bank details to try and find fraud, very loosely defined, and to find it and then censure people for it. And anyone who's been on welfare, like I was maybe 5 years ago, had on job seekers allowance, and I'm terrified with this stuff. If I filled in a form wrong, then who knows what a AI that checks it is going to think. I already know that AI systems simply don't work. They're not good. We're not at a point where they are ready to be used commercially, and they're definitely not ready to be used in government, especially when people's lives are involved. And onto the cruelty of generative AI. Probably at first glance, you wouldn't think it's a cruel thing to do to create a paragraph of text, to create a picture of Garfield with big boobs or something. They seem like these things have been around for years. There was always like a thing on Twitter going around where someone would find like a AI prompt or a thing you could submit your photo to yassify you or something. These things happen all the time. They are just toys at the end of the day. And you wouldn't think these toys are as cruel as they are, but essentially for one, they are being used like right now to take people out of jobs not in virtually any job, but in things like graphic design, in copywriting, like jobs that I had like 10 years ago, like basic, just out of uni copywriting jobs. They can, to a certain extent, be done by ChatGPT right now, because a lot of that stuff isn't made to be, you don't write it to be read, you write it for Google to read. That can actually be done by ChatGPT right now. And also graphic design. It's not good enough that you could put it on a poster. I think the company Skechers, the shoe company, have used generated imagery in their like commercial ads. I think Marvel recently used a AI ad for the Fantastic Four movie. So there has been some commercial use of this. It always gets called out. It always blows up in their faces. But that could have been someone's job. Someone would love to put a Skechers ad or a Marvel ad in their portfolio. That'd be really great for a graphic designer. But yeah, they don't want it. When Skechers or Marvel puts out a piece of work like this, they are saying to people, we didn't use a graphic designer for this. We didn't want someone to have money. We didn't want someone to be able to pay their rent. We wanted to go on the computer and type in awesome Fantastic Four movie poster, looks a bit 60s, and then have it spat out at us. And then everyone sees, oh, wait, that person has 4 hands. In that way, it is a very cruel thing to create that. And I think this is my most right-wing opinion by far. I think ugliness is cruel in a way. And that kind of aligns me with like statue-avy guys, people who celebrate Western art and the beauty of the Western woman. And I'm not, there's some lovely Western women and lovely Western art, but there's also, art from around the world that's beautiful. There's art that's not supposed to be beautiful that is beautiful. Like, I don't know, Paul Klee or a billion different artists. It's not traditionally beautiful. It is in some ways very ugly. That's very compelling. I love the Chapman brothers. That is like apocalyptically ugly. I love their art. Yeah, I mean, check out fucking hell. It's in the shape of a swastika and it looks like a mental patient made a Warhammer diorama. But I love it. But yeah, ugliness of the kind that's generated by ChatGPT, I find it very anti-human. I find it very like offensive in a way. It's very it makes my day worse to see it in the same way that if I see a dead dog in the street, I would feel bad. You know, the same way I see like garbage everywhere. It's like sick building syndrome for our culture. It's being around this stuff all the time just makes things worse. It makes you feel bad in a way that like punk kind of art or art that's like where the ugliness is kind of the point where it's interesting that you don't get. Like if I was to listen to a Merzbow record right now, which is unlistenable to 99% of the population, I wouldn't feel the way I'd feel if I listened to an AI generated racist Schlager song that went to number one in Germany recently. Now, Schlager music is horrible anyway, but it is. I mean, it is like a kind of blight on our culture. It makes everything worse to have this stuff around.
It's insulting. Yeah. It's incurious. It's fundamentally. I mean, when metal, like recently, a few metal bands like Pestilence, I think even Dark Throne have used AI art in their covers.
I got in big trouble for saying that that Dark Throne record was. A lot of people didn't think that Dark Throne record had AI art. I thought it did. The artist who created that is actually a very good artist. He did covers for Imperial Triumphant. Really good artist.
AI.
I genuinely think it is.
I think it looks like it. Listeners, you decide. Like, comment. It is Dark.
I genuinely think it is.
Agree.
Yeah, I don't think he is a very good artist. I think he can produce great art when he wants. I think in that case, he experimented with AI.
Well, I mean, a lot of the times when I've worked with people who I know can produce great art and produce great covers. Let's say it's a certain left-wing book publisher that ends up using AI art recently. I mean, these AI art things show up usually not because of like the artist is somehow like given up on making art. Usually it's the fact that people don't want to pay a lot for good artwork, especially ironically bigger companies. And so when they're like, well, if I'm not getting paid enough for like to use my labor capacity, I'm just going to prompt this and put some stuff over the top of it. And I might still like it. I've still got to compose it. But a lot of the elements of composition there have been taken off because you're not going to pay me for what I can do. You're not curious enough really about what I want to do to see that it's worth it. And so you're just going to get that. And I think a lot of that does end up being a kind of artistic austerity. I think AI is a kind of austerian art form par excellence, if I was going to call it anything.
Yeah, and austerity is cruelty at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. It's taking away things that people need to get by. In this case, the thing people need to get by in their lives is art, it's beauty, it's things like that. It's gone to the point I have to send off a lot of stuff to magazines in my job, and it's gone to the point where magazines are saying, please don't use AI generated text. We can always tell. And there are certain cliches that ChatGPT has, where it always starts articles in the fast-moving world of whatever you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And now editors at magazines are saying, if you start an article with in the fast-moving world of X, we know, don't send it to us. We don't want to see it. You are blacklisted.
Well, Clarkesworld stopped taking in submissions for months because of this stuff, didn't they?
Yeah, that was terrible. Clarkesworld is a brilliant magazine and launched so many careers, and it's been inundated. A lot of people have been. Yeah, I know a few people who run literary magazines, and it's a blight on them. And it's because there are YouTube videos out there telling you how to make money by being a short story writer in the year 2025. That brilliant way to make loads of money. You always make staggering amounts of money on short stories for sci-fi magazines in 2025. Yeah, people have make these usually AI generated videos that like promise these kids like a side hustle where they can make money, and they never have. I've never read a short story in a magazine. I thought, oh wait, that's got the tells of AI in there. That's probably some AI. No one has ever published these things, and yet people are sending them by the bucket load, getting zero return on their investment of time. But it's still happening to the point where these places have had to shut down like a large part of their submission process because they just can't keep going through all these things going, oh, wait, this is AI slop. I don't want to be reading this again. And they're outnumbered 10 to 1. It's again a cruel, ugly, stupid technology that's just made things worse with no return.
There's even that Israeli startup company that was allowing people to just AI generate entire books. It was called Spines. Yeah, I mean, it is just a way of. I do wonder if this is like part of the transition to a service economy and sort of neoliberal era, where a search engine isn't actually searching, it's producing, and people see search engines as almost like a slot where you receive the treat upon command, you receive the knowledge upon command, you receive the image, you receive the thing that you want to find, you receive the object of desire on command. And I think in a way, what these so-called AI machines do, especially the generative ones, is they act like an instant treat dispenser. And I find that interesting, especially in the context of when you talk about, in the article you say, that AI imagery does look like shit, but the problem is that even if AI could produce good looking art, people on the right wouldn't like it. And I also find that interesting in terms of even the earlier days of AI art, when what was interesting about it was how off it was. I remember like early sort of generative things like Wombo, it was called, and it was just these very dreamy, almost like nebula like set landscapes, and they were fun because they were fucked. Whereas now that pretense completely gone. There's something specific to the slop that is so attractive to contemporary right.
Yeah, I mean, I've got friends who make algorithmically generated music and art and video, and that is massively different to what's happening on ChatGPT, DALL-E, etc. It's not suitable for making art in really any way, which is it is why I think the right has gravitated to it. They are very anti-art people. They do not enjoy art especially in today. There would probably be some pushback to AI art if we could bring Dostoevsky to 2025. I'm sure he would hate it. Or any of these people. William F. Buckley would probably hate it. He would probably say, yes, this is stupid, it's ugly, it doesn't partake in the Western tradition of great art production. I mean, the statue avi guys on Twitter, they've embraced AI as well. They will generate an AI image of a beautiful Western woman, and that would seemingly go against everything about that they liked about Western art. They like the talents that goes into making a statue where you can see the folds in someone's clothing, or to see the greatness of a mighty cathedral. If you could just write a prompt and spit it out, then it seems that they didn't want anything to do with the greatness of Western art at all. They just wanted to be dicks to people. They wanted to say, I love Western art, therefore I do not like African or Asian or female originated art or queer art or modern art or postmodern art. It shows that it was always about just being a dick on the computer. It was always cruelty is the point again. There was no love of art there. It was just being a dick.
It's why it's so sort of distinctively Hitlerian. To the extent that it is just a failed artist whose taste in art was pretty kitsch and in a way it's quite camp and retro even for the time, even all the way to going up to I do see a lot of the tech right, especially as failed artists, and this is why the tech right, particularly the ones who are so cruel online, want to be loved so much. They want this kind of affirmation just for having the idea. Because really, I mean, CEOs are interesting creatures in my experience. They're mostly ideas guys. And I mean that in the sense of they don't have many good ideas, but they do have the money. And so usually they bring it to the people that understand things. And traditionally, we could say, thank you, we're going to put that on the fridge. And then everyone else in the company can see it and say, oh, that's really good. And then someone actually does it who is actually competent. Whereas now the money has more ideas because now they're just locked into their phone.
Yeah. There has been a change, a kind of sea change in what CEOs want to do. They do see themselves as creators now, and that is horrible when you work in a company where the CEO sees themselves as being a creative. Oh, yeah, I hate it. You're constantly trying to put out fires that they start because they don't understand things and they're not good at the things that they want to do. It's I run a mile when I have to work with people like that in just business. It never works. They always end up fucking up. They lose money hand over fist to try and chase their whims. It's horrible. But yeah,
I guess one question I do have, especially towards the end of the essay, you do talk a little bit about what is the best way to respond to this kind of art, because obviously, you talk about how this they don't believe it's good art either, really, and so ultimately what they're doing is sort of flooding. What was it Steve Bannon who said flooding the zone with shit, just so that people can't. Everyone's stuck trying to wade through it, and actually they're at the top of the floodgates, and then they're just controlling everything. I mean, in terms of I think this is true in the sense of you don't actually have to debate the right in that sense, because Sam Seed is just getting dogpiled with people who have no idea what they're talking about and don't want to know because they're trying to get in mostly to make content for clips, because the medium is kind of the message. It's why sort of you're never going to really win in the UK, sort of trying to tackle Murdoch, by going on GB News or something. Not thinking of anything particular there. But in terms of the general sort of, how should we respond to this kind of batshit contemporary aesthetic? Do we just have to bring back a kind of shaming? Because in a way, sort of the big thing, the big moving right show has been a moving right against the idea of any kind of pushback or shame, with this idea of a scare of, oh, you're just trying to destroy me. I was like, well, if you get destroyed by this, maybe you should be.
It's obviously very difficult to talk to these people, not even debate in a formal context like that Sam Cedar thing. It's virtually impossible to communicate with people on the right. They do not play by our rules. The right has always been a reaction against Enlightenment humanism. It's not. They don't, even though they accept that it's true that there is an external reality to us. Reason, rationality does work. They reject it on an emotional basis, and always have. That was Burke, that was the Maestro, that was Nietzsche, it was a lot of people on the right. But only now is it like you can meet someone in the street, you can talk to a cab driver who has this bizarre anti-rationalism, anti-humanism, where kind of just the basics of how the universe work just doesn't seem to apply to them. They don't want it to work that way. They don't want to know things. They don't believe you should have to find things out. They're not curious at all. So yeah, debating them it's almost a fool's game at this point. But we do see that they do feel shame. They feel shame very acutely. Going back to the psychology of these people, they've been made to feel shame their entire lives. Their parents, the people around them, they're constantly shaming each other in many ways. They don't debate. They don't say this is wrong. They call you a cuck if you do something you don't like. So yeah, shame seems to work. It did. You remember last year, the calling American Republicans weird. That worked like fucking gangbusters. That was so good. The recent thing with pictures of JD Vance looking really weird. He is fuming over those, where he was booed when he went to like some sort of opera or something. That destroyed him. The take down Tesla thing. Elon Musk was crying on TV about that stuff. And that has been purely down to people shaming Tesla owners and making it so that if you buy a Tesla, people will hate you. And there's only a very tiny amount of people on the right who are fully beyond shame. Plenty of them are beyond reason. You can call them stupid all day. You can say their ideas are wrong. You can show their ideas are wrong. It bounces off them. Shame goes right to the core of them. Only people like, I know, Kanye West is someone who literally can't feel shame. So yeah, it is shame at the end of the day. We need to, that we'll get this. But honestly, since I wrote the article, the amount of cracks that have appeared in ChatGPT, OpenAI as a company, that's like been the center of the AI revolution the last couple of years. I don't think we need to do anything. We can just kind of let them go to it. They are gonna destroy themselves. They're a company that's losing money hand over fist, has no path to profitability whatsoever. They're products that they can actually make money from, these like subscriptions to ChatGPT. They acknowledge they're still losing money on even ones that cost $20,000 a month. They're a company that is going to implode really soon, much sooner than we think. The amount of money that people like SoftBank, our old friend Mashiosi's son, have put into them, and SoftBank themselves are going to implode. They are just dying on the vine right now. They owe much more money than they can possibly generate, even if they sold every single asset they have down to the studs in the walls. Yeah, I think it doesn't sound particularly like good practice here, but yeah, we just need to wait them out. They're going to destroy themselves. Even the amount that they've kind of put their thumbs on a scale of the economy and investment, eventually the chickens come home to roost. I mean, this is the only good thing we have on our side when fighting the right is they don't believe in reason, logic, outcomes. 2 + 2 = 4. But the universe doesn't care. Facts don't care about your feelings. I know the right invented that, but that's what's going to be like on their gravestone.
What did Che Guevara say? It's not my fault that reality is Marxist.
Exactly. Yeah. The truth has a liberal bias, as we used to say in the cringe early 2000s. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's just how much damage they do on the way out. I mean, you can always just look up like any animal on Google image search right now, and you will see mostly a lot of AI generated imagery, and you'll see a lot of AI generated answers for things. If we were to get rid of ChatGPT today, we'd still be dealing with its fallout, toxic fallout for decades. Like, this stuff doesn't go away. Once you generate something that's full of hallucinations and put it on the internet, it's going nowhere unless someone finds it and deletes it. And Google themselves are not going to be able to find that stuff and then determine what is a real picture of a sea slug versus what isn't. And there's going to be AI stuff appearing in books, in articles, that there's going to be information that people are going to be putting out there in people's PhD theses that there's going to be sourced from AI hallucinations that they're not going to know about, because it will be third hand. And we kind of fucked the internet in a kind of cyberpunk 2027 way for a long time. I don't think people are quite grasping with how much we have fucked one of the biggest achievements of humanity with this stuff in 18 months. We're really fucked the internet with this stuff.
And as you said, it's going to be impossible to shift this stuff out of the internet. And ultimately, it's also because one of the things I think it's really awesome that you point out as well is that the contemporary right, in many ways, forms a kind of internal ecosystem of, if I was going to put it roughly, sort of, like men's mental health, the sort of things of mutual, you describe it as sort of mutual aid, when, like Zuckerberg will become a new type of guy, go on Rogan, lie through his teeth about like going hunting or something, and there'll just be like a general community of these very somehow sad, somehow lonely, yet infinitely rich and powerful men who are doing this with their money. I mean, obviously, it's still bad they had much money in the first place, but it is a little bit more insulting that they're spending it on this. And can we unpack a little bit, about how there's a kind of class solidarity in the very imposition of AI into everything?
Yeah, I mean, that was why That's a big part of why they all started using it all at the same time. Why even Tommy Robinson started using it. He's not a tech billionaire. He's nothing to do with tech at all. He knows that if he signals to the right that he's on their side, then there's money out there for him. Some of the money that goes towards even very fringe groups comes from guys in tech. It may not be people we know about like Elon Musk or something, but even Elon Musk has given a lot of money to people like Nigel Farage. There is a very close affinity between tech guys and the right. And the way the right can signal that they're on their side is because of what I was saying a minute ago, but about how precarious this whole thing is, how so much money is tied up with it. Just being out there saying like, yeah, this is cool. I like this. That means a lot to them. They're emotional creatures at the end of the day, as we all are. I mean, if any of us was to start a project and if it was a bit shit, our friends would still say, "Yeah, keep going. It's a good. You should be doing this." Just because they're friends. I mean, these people are being friendly towards each other, even though they're monsters, even though they're incapable of any positive human emotions. They're still in a kind of class solidarity with each other as a group of people, and they're bigging each other up. They're saying this stuff is good, it's worthwhile. I use it all the time. It is their mutual aid. It's their GoFundMe. Yeah, they've been, and it was the same with NFTs, right? If you find a like AI promoting a Twitter account and go back a few years, you'll find it was actually an NFT promoting invariably. I mean, these people have been around for a long time doing the exact same things, and Web 3.0 was the same. Facebook wasted at the time the most money that had ever been lost on anything in the stock market. But people buy Teslas because they now believe in the right. It's like a mutually reinforcing signaling. Right wing people buy Teslas. Teslas move to the right. It becomes its own ecosystem. Everyone's helping each other out. Yeah, it's a bizarre thing, but ultimately, it does go back to the lack of critique that they have. The way they can't say, "Oh, wait, this AI stuff looks like shit. I don't want this near me. I don't want to use it. It's bad." They don't do that for each other. No one on the right was saying, "Tommy Robinson, what you've done is stupid. The people are going the wrong way. That's if they go into the sea, they drown and die. That's not how people worked on D-Day." No one called him on that. It was entirely people on the left coming in and saying like, and posting pig poop balls in his mentions. It was, if you'd shown that to Elon Musk, he would have said, "Yeah, it's great, love it." Doing my Elon Musk thing, it's a little power stance. But yeah, they can't see this stuff like the rest of the world can. So they enforce it. They yes and it constantly.
It's almost tempting, sort of the spectre of accelerationism here have been like, are we gonna like help them Bugs Bunny themselves into the wall? But as you said, I think they're going to do this on their own time frame.
Totally.
I mean,
yeah.
as soon as ChatGPT, or as soon as OpenAI generally opened up their data sets beyond, I think it was November 2021, I'm like, oh, now it's just going to get really bad, because now it's going to get what Jason Zdowski calls Habsburg AI. It's just going to be feeding on itself, and there is a kind of, I mean, not to be so Freudian, but this is basically incestuous logic of just capital eating its own shit now, and it's almost like at this point it reminded me a little bit of something from Harlan Ellison. I have no mouth and I must scream. The machine masturbated and we had to take it or die, which that is the Labour Party platform these days.
You're going to get a rejection from Universal Credit that says, like, "You have no idea how much I hate you humans." But
I mean, well, given that they're currently building a euthanasia system that's going to be run by Serco, I mean, I'm pretty sure AM is... Yeah, I mean, yeah, it works really well. It works really well in Canada. Thank you to the American fascists making Canada seem sane when they are also batshits. This is firmly but making jokes being an anti-Canadian podcast. It is not an anti-Canadian podcast. But well, do you know what? Actually, I don't know. We'll go back to the Aimé Césaire at some point in the few decolonial figures. Then we'll suspend the question whether or not we're an anti-Canadian podcast until later. But I know, Gareth, you've got another article coming up soon as well about the use of deep fakes. And could you just give us a bit of a hint, actually, as to how this plays into the right's imagination and their general cruelty, particularly as it comes to new forms of revenge pornography and targeted harassment against women?
Yeah, so that's actually up today in Luke O'Neill's, not Substack, because we don't use Substack anymore because Nazis. His newsletter, Welcome to Hell World, which I really love. I've been wanting to write for it for years. And based on the New Socialist article, he reached out to me and said, like, hey, can you write something for me? Which is really great. So, yeah, in the article I wrote for New Socialist, there was a single paragraph in there on basically with the right, it's always going to come back to hatred of women. The cruelty is the point, but the target of cruelty is nearly always women or men who have been female, or ideas that are feminine. Even when you see things like Doge, it's destroying things that are female coded in government. They're not going to destroy cops and the military, or they're going to destroy things like veterans being cared for, because that's lady stuff, caring, being kind to people. So yeah, I wanted to look more into basically what the tech right is doing with technology and AI technology right now. And there's been an act of Congress. I don't know how the American political system works, so forgive me if I'm butchering this, but it was introduced originally by Ted Cruz, a great guy, love him, friend of the show, and then kind of pushed through by Melania Trump, so First Lady. And this is called the Take It Down Act. And it was kind of inspired by this teenage girl from Ted Cruz's state of Texas who had a bunch of AI generated porn made of her and put up on Snapchat, and it took about a year for Snapchat to take it down. So obviously, fucked up, unacceptable, not good. We don't want that in the world. But this Take It Down Act has emerged at a time when this kind of like gender revanchism is being turned up to 11. The whole your body, my choice thing. It's everywhere now. So how does a political movement that hates women, that just despises them, wants them to be nothing but slaves, how do they introduce an act that is also going to help women and is going to hurt the kind of men who is their base? It's lonely guys in their bedrooms who are on the computer too much. That's the right-wing subject right now. It's also me, but luckily I dodged that.
Yeah, how do we do this?
I don't know. There's most alternate universes. I'm like the Curtis Yarvin of that universe. I know left-wing people always joke that, oh, I could easily go right. I'd be the best right-wing. I so would. I'd be Hitler.
I'd be the Dungeon Symphonic Land, I'd just be great at it.
So I kind of delved into these deepfake forums. So I had to install VPNs and stuff and do all this and it's grim out there, man. It's worse than you imagine on these. So on these places, people make AI generated videos of usually celebrities. So you can imagine there's a market for that, but it's worse than you think. It's not just adult celebrities. You can see the highest ranked videos on sites like Mr. Deepfakes, which is the biggest deepfake place. And the highest ranked ones are people like Millie Bobby Brown, Kiernan Ship, Michelle Trachtenberg, who died recently, which is just fucked on so many levels. But it's not her she was about 39 when she died. It's her when she was in Buffy and stuff. There's a lot of almost just a teeny bit off child porn to a lot of it. And the way these people talk in their forums is, one is it's very obviously done out of pure hatred of women. It'll be a lot of things like Taylor Swift, for example, being a kind of not even outspoken feminists, but like very basic girl boss feminism just seem to rile these guys up, and they really want to see, I mean, I don't know what I can get away with saying on here, but things like gang rape scenarios. Usually there's some racial elements you can imagine. I'm not going to say what the racial element is. You know what it is. Yeah, it's absolutely horrible, and it is so right wing. They talk about right wing things in the forums. The Mr. Deepfakes website, out of all the mascots they could have had for a website, their mascot is Donald fucking Trump. Sorry, Donald J. Trump, I believe. But yeah, it's Donald Trump with a little like pulling off an anonymous mask. Out of all the people in the world they could have chosen, obviously Donald Trump. Just makes sense, doesn't it? I know, right? They really don't do subtext. They make it so obvious that this whole thing comes out of the right wing kind of sexual swamp. Just the way these people have gone from being raised in horrible homes where they are subjected to arbitrary discipline, usually some forms of sexual violence, usually corporal punishment at homes. There's a very good book written recently called Wild Faith by Talia Levin about kind of Christian parenting manuals and how it affects like evangelical children as they grow up. There's a lot of interviews in there with like children of evangelicals, like how they were raised and how just warped their home life is. So how that ends up on the internet in the form of these deepfakes, how a right-wing person will have grown up being constantly abused by their father, but their mother is there too, like not doing anything about it. And that then turns into this hatred of women. You'd think it would turn into hatred of men and masculinity and patriarchy. And in some cases it does. In my case, it did. But it more often than not, it turns into a hatred of women and to hatred of anything feminine and a desire to see women tormented and abused. Even on mainstream porn sites like Pornhub, if a woman dies, she goes right to the top of the rankings. It's like whenever
it's Videodrome.
It is worse. Videodrome was positive compared to this stuff.
So I mean, like the show in the thing, like the signal, it gives you like some sort of hideous brain tumor that makes you hallucinate all the torture, and it's just
God. Yeah, I felt so I knew I was doing this for good, but I felt so dirty after looking at this stuff, and it's a tip of the iceberg. I mean, there's been a lot of articles about fucking actual neo-Nazi Satanist pedophile groups. There's like a lot of them right now. I mean, that's a whole other thing, going out to the Order of Nine Angles, 764, No Lives Matter group. I mean, these are guys who like go on to Roblox. My son plays Roblox and try and recruit kids into the worst stuff you can imagine. It's monstrous. And as you get further right, the importance of sexual violence just ramps up like a hockey stick graph. Like you can see on like mainstream conservatives, there's obviously, compared to like a mainstream Democrat or Labour Party person, they obviously are more in favor of sexual violence, but they can't literally say, yes, we think rape is good. They have to say, we're against it, we're against pedophiles and so on. But as you move further right into, say, like 4chan culture, for example, remember that whole mods are asleep post-X? That started on 4chan as mods are asleep post-child porn. As in, oh, we can get away with posting child porn now. And people still say mods are asleep post-X. Loads of places, I've probably said it myself. It's because that was just part of the culture back then. And as you go even further right into these literal neo-Nazi Satanist groups, like you have to have committed sexual assault and usually against a child in order to be a part of these groups sometimes. And there's a probable link between one of the most prominent of these ultra sadist groups and Doge, the Doge group in US. There's one of them has a possible connection to one of these discords where these people will share like pictures of children they got to mutilate themselves or kill their pets. There's a quite good possibility that, the guy with the broccoli hair,
Big
Mr.
balls.
Big balls, yeah. There's a quite good possibility he was in that subculture. Maybe he still is.
It is a time to feel very mad. You're like, okay, all these people I see online who are really annoying and I hate them. Yeah, it turns out they've now taken over the US government. Yeah, Nick Land might be the Weltgeist, apparently. It really is kind of, and in trying to explain it to people, this is why we need articles like yours, honestly, because people would not believe it. People would not believe it.
Yeah, I try and explain this to people at work, like, the typical coworker people, and trying to explain to them that there's a direct link between Brexit, which everyone knows about. Everyone knows what Brexit is, and a guy in America who decided that there's an AI god in the future, and we all have to please this AI god, otherwise it will torture a digital copy of us for all of eternity. Like, there's a very clear link between Brexit and the Rocco's Basilisk, and also Elon Musk and Grimes. It is. It makes you sound insane to like know the truth of this stuff. Yeah, to just have like a basic understanding of where all the ideas that shape our world come from makes you sound like a madman.
And you don't want to be right, because I go to, like, when I'm at org meetings, they're like, okay, you understand, like, the tech, right? And I'm like, please don't make me explain this. I feel like I'm inflicting this on
Can't
you.
do Nick Land
But
again.
this is the logic of how these people operate. I'm sorry, it's mostly a bunch of 4chan memes, but this is actually the dominant ideology of the global hegemon. I'm really sorry, everyone. Here's who Curtis Yarvin is. Here's who. I mean, it's been great for me to some extent. Because I've just been like, oh yeah. So now now the enemy is at the gates, and you dare to ask me who Frank Fioretti is? Like, but it's not a good thing to want to have a knowledge of, because you feel a bit like, Cassandra. I know we've come up to way over the hour now. I just want to ask, of course, you said we have the current article coming out on the deepfakes and the hate representation of women. I'm going to link that down below. Of course, we got the new Socialist AI, the new explicit fascism essay in the link before. Is there anything else coming out from yourself writing? Obviously, I know, of course, we have Death Sentence, and you mentioned Tally 11. Also, listeners, go to that episode with Tally 11 on Death Sentence. Bang. And you also learn great music too. I have discovered a lot of bands. I'm really into Kyle Estra now. So thank you.
Yeah, I don't have any articles in the work. I don't want to big myself up here, but some literary agents have expressed a certain interest in expanding this into these two articles I've just written, something more book length. So I'm kind of pushing that as far as it will go. Who knows? Like I say, I've worked in that industry. I know like nine speculative things out of 10 don't go anywhere. So I'm not, putting my future on that or anything. But yeah, I mean, just today I got some ideas for the next thing that's going to be like part 3, Return to Jedi of this little triptych I'm doing on tech and the right at the moment. So look out for that. But yeah, mostly you can find me just shooting the shit with my friends, talking about weird books and death metal. So yeah, just listen to that.
Comrades like Gareth, go into these spaces so we don't have to. Or more strictly, you don't have to, because sadly I am also cursed with these burdens. Mm-hmm. Although I gotta admit, you couldn't send me into the deep fake mines if you paid me. So thank you for your service, comrades. And on that note, we'll say thank you everyone for listening. And I was about to say enjoy your weekend, but I don't know when it's going to come out. So regardless of when you're enjoying it, enjoy it. Not deep fakes. Enjoy the weekend if you're on the weekend. This is getting too rambly. I'm cutting it off now. Good night, folks. Peace.